All right, welcome to the relationship show. This guy writes his post. He's 27. He says, I regret breaking up with my ex-girlfriend who's 26 of 2 years. So here's the post. I mean, it is just massive. And so I'll just read the last paragraph. I haven't read the whole thing or really any of it other than this last paragraph. But just from the title and from this, I can give you kind of a picture and a pattern of what I commonly see when this is the case. He says, I still want to be with her, but I will not pursue her anymore. I want her to be happy. Still, I fantasize about reconnecting. Right there. Fantasizing is one of the biggest patterns you do, especially when you get rejected. It's because it's like, well, oftentimes it's because you're fearful that you can't do better. Or you're just like, you go out there, you fail, or you're thinking about her and with the space, it's like sometimes you feel lonely, or with the space, sometimes the bad things that happen in the relationship fade, and it's like you just focus on the good. And when we have these fantasies, I mean, it's like, well, if we're creating a fantasy, we don't really want to make it painful. We make it good just naturally. So for the most part, they're just like an ideal picture of the reality of the situation. So just be careful of fantasies. I know it's difficult to do, difficult to overcome, especially coming out of a painful experience or a painful relationship. Yeah, okay, so he says, still I fantasize about reconnecting. Indeed, there are couples out there that reconnect after perhaps maybe more severe insults to the relationship. So he's comparing other people. He's like, you can always do that. And so it's like, man, if you go broke, it's like, oh, you compare yourself to some other foreign country, or just making yourself feel good and justifying your own position. So this is kind of what he's doing. A similar situation. It's like, well, he's had a bad relationship. I don't know the details of it, but he had a bad relationship. Something happened, but he's comparing himself. He's like, oh, there's probably way worse relationships out there. But really all he's trying to do is convince himself to act on this fantasy. And I was a good boyfriend outside of this incident. It especially hurts because I feel that if we got back together with myself knowing what I do now, with the awareness I have now, I don't know, sometimes when people brag about like how much they know, sometimes they often don't know. So it's like when I find myself in these patterns, I immediately check myself. So it's like if I feel like I'm being smart or something like that, I've often found that I'm actually being pretty foolish and pretty dumb in those instances. So every time I act like I get this thought in my mind that's saying like, oh, I'm like really smart or really good at this thing, or that was smart of me to do. It's like, okay, where was that dumb though? Because there's something. If I can put myself into like this high position and think highly of myself in a moment, just like kind of what this guy's doing right now, it almost drops your guard. And that dropping of the guard is usually, in my mind, an indicator that I'm doing something stupid. And so it's like, this is a way to combat that emotionally within my mind. So it's like when I do something stupid, I have to compensate by thinking that I'm smart. And so just recognize that pattern. That is very useful. And I use that constantly when those thoughts just come out of the blue like that. It's like, that gives me a sign that, okay, where am I messing up, or where am I being really stupid? And I just kind of really look at my situation. It's like, okay, where am I not acting in like an intelligent way, or what am I not seeing in this situation? And so use that as an indicator when you do things like talk about how good you are. Use that as an indicator to find out where you're not, where your blind spot is, because almost always you'll find that that really is the case. It's because like we are compensating for something we feel or we know we're lacking. And sometimes it's not always conscious. And so it's almost like a subconscious thing. And so it's like you have to really dig for that information, just find out what it is that you're failing at or what's kind of lacking. And it can be a huge tool. So we'll continue on here. It says, knowing what I do now, with the awareness that I have now, there would be no doubt, certainty. So it's like, look at Benjamin Franklin. He talks about this as well. He says he eliminated like words like certainty, I'm certain of this, and being completely sure of things. He eliminated that word from his vocabulary. That's how strongly he felt about not using these words and being so like really arrogant in your skill level. Read his biography. It is incredible. He's really into like self-improvement and self-analysis, and you can really get some good points and really good references by reading that book. There'd be no doubt that I would marry this woman. Fantasy right there. So now he was in a relationship for 2 years. Now he's probably not succeeding outside of that, or he feels lonely and he feels hurt, and that's motivating to him to create this fantasy. And oftentimes the fantasy leads to like overcommitting or jumping into a relationship based on the things in your head, not really what you're feeling in your heart. Just be very careful about making these fantasies up, because oftentimes, more often than not, they get you in trouble.